Hi, I'm Veronica Wasek with 5-Minute Bookkeeping. I empower virtual bookkeeping pros to become confident professionals and business owners. In this video, I'm going to give you my insider's tips for tackling the biggest QBO cleanups. Are you working on a big QuickBooks Online cleanup and you're not sure where to get started? After working with hundreds of QBO cleanups, I've developed a system for organizing my cleanup projects from start to finish. I'll share with you the lessons I have learned so you can be successful with your own QBO cleanup projects. Let's get started first with defining what is a cleanup. And a cleanup is really like a puzzle. In fact, it's like a puzzle with no picture. It has a lot of missing pieces. And there's probably other pieces thrown in from another puzzle. And that's what it's like when you start a massive QBO cleanup. But really, a cleanup is taking a set of messy and incomplete books and going through a process of reviewing the books, catching them up, fixing what's wrong, and reconciling, and getting to a point where you have complete, accurate, and tax-ready financials, meaning that if you're cleaning up a whole year for your client, by the time you're done cleaning up the books, your client should be able to take those books and hand them over to their tax preparer, and the tax preparer should be able to do just very few adjustments in order to get the tax return done. There are certain types of cleanups. You may be hired as a virtual bookkeeper to clean up specific areas, or perhaps you're an employee of a company and you're wanting to clean up a specific area of QuickBooks. So that may be bank reconciliations, undeposited funds, inventory, and other areas. And the kind of cleanup that I specialize in and that typically you would come across is a full cleanup. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So when you're doing that full cleanup, what do you clean up? First of all, your goal is to have tax-ready books. So again, being able to present the tax preparer with books that are cleaned up and that need very few adjustments. Another goal when cleaning up the books is to have financials that are meaningful and accurate. Having financials that really tell the story of the business to the business owner, to a banker, to an investor, and whoever's looking at the books. And the books are caught up, cleaned up, and reconciled. When we're looking at what to clean up, we're cleaning up bank reconciliations, undeposited funds, balance sheet accounts, reconciling the balance sheet to a prior tax return if the business entity, at least in the U.S., is an 1120S, an 1120, or a Form 1065. Cleaning up the profit and loss accounts, cleaning up the accounts receivable and accounts payable agings, cleaning up inventory. You may need to clean up sales tax, payroll, the chart of accounts, the products and services list, the company settings, bank feeds, and app integrations. One of the biggest tips that you need to be aware of when tackling a big cleanup is that you have to get organized and you have to follow a system. The challenges with doing a big cleanup, and really any cleanup, is really knowing where do you start. So you're asking yourself, where do I start? What order should I work in? How do I know when I'm done? I can definitely identify with that after doing so many cleanups. You can get really overwhelmed very easily. So you should be following up a cleanup workflow. And that workflow starts with getting a signed service agreement and paid invoice, going through an onboarding process with your client, getting everything you need from them, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Going through a planning phase, making sure that you know what needs to be done, when it'll be done, when you'll have the work completed to your client, then actually performing the cleanup and going through and doing everything that you need to do to get those books caught up and cleaned up. The next step might be communication, possibly with your team members. If you have a team, communication with the client, communication with the tax preparer, and that's really going on throughout the cleanup project. Next is resolving issues. There may be questions that you have that you need to address with the tax preparer. There may be questions that you have for the client and they haven't responded yet. So you need to go through a process of ensuring that you have all those answers, you have everything you need to complete that cleanup. And then you want to go through a review process and actually going through and reviewing everything again, making sure that you did everything that you set out to do in your planning process so that you don't miss any mistakes or any oversights. And then you finish the cleanup, and then you have a meeting with your client to show them their new clean books and talk about other services that you might provide to them. By far, one of the most important things that you need to have in your cleanup is a checklist. And the key here is to follow a system. You want to use a checklist and you want to customize it to your specific client and to their specific needs. Here's an excerpt of the cleanup checklist that I use. And it has several sections that you can follow, starting with setting up clearing accounts, and I will talk about that in another video, getting all the information that you need from the client, reconciling the books to the tax return balance sheet if that is applicable, dealing with commingling of business and personal expenses, verifying that all transactions are recorded in QBO and entering missing transactions. And it goes on from there. But the most important thing is for you to have a checklist to ensure that you're working in order, as well as making sure that you are addressing and cleaning up all of the issues that you came across. And another really big tip that you should know about is that you need to know when to get started. After working with so many cleanups, in fact, hundreds of cleanups, I learned very early on that I really shouldn't get started doing the cleanup until I had certain things in place. First of all, you must have a signed service agreement and a retainer. Until you have a signed service agreement and upfront payment from your client, they're really not a client. They're a prospect. So when you have that signed service agreement or a signed engagement letter plus upfront payment from them, then you have a client, and then you can go into the onboarding process and requesting the documents and access that you need from them. So then make sure that you have everything that you need from your client. Usually for our cleanup clients, we request a copy of their last business return. So if you're in the US, that would be the 1120S, 1120 or 1065. Of course, if you're in another country, you would request the appropriate business tax return. You want to have a copy, PDF copies of all of the business bank and credit card accounts for the period being cleaned up. So if you're cleaning up a whole year, then you need all of the PDF copies of all of the business bank and credit card accounts for that year. You need to have accountants access to their QuickBooks Online. If you will be coordinating with their tax preparer, then you need an introduction to their tax preparer if you're not doing their taxes yourself. And there may be other items that you need from your client. Make sure that you have all of that before you get started. I found that early on, I would try to get started, but I didn't have everything. And it was just a whole lot of starts and stops and having to ask the client for things and really not being able to get the cleanup done because I was missing so many things. I just shared with you my tips for taking on massive QBO cleanups. I will be doing more videos on QuickBooks Online cleanup in the future, so make sure that you subscribe to my channel. I'm Veronica Wasek with 5-Minute Bookkeeping. Do you need a QuickBooks Online cleanup checklist? Then check the description below for the links to purchase my own colossal QBO cleanup checklist. And look for the links to join my Facebook community and for the other resources that I share with you, including my online academy for virtual bookkeepers. If this content is helping you, then subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and give me a thumbs up. And let me know in the comments if there are any other topics you'd like me to do in the future. I'm here to help you. I'm Veronica Wasek. I'll see you next time.